Evening, everyone. Welcome. This is a great showing for this wonderful event that has been put together. I'm sure you're going to all be very interactive and participate in this program, which we hope to continue for the long term. My name is Raj Desai. I'm the Executive Director here at TIE, and many of you certainly have come quite often to our events. I think many are new faces. So how many of you are first-timers at TIE? Please join, become a member. We do about 40 of these dinner events a year for less than 30 cents an event for you, cost-wise or thereabout. We have the annual conference coming up. But anyway, before I go further, we really want to get started with the event. So I'll invite President Venkatesh Shukla to talk about our programs and especially our TIECon coming up. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Raj. So, welcome all to this excellent program. TIE is really a volunteer organization. Most of us who organize these kind of programs are volunteers. TIE started about 21 years ago, and the idea was to create an entity that promotes wealth creation through entrepreneurship. And the idea was to get some highly successful people and get them, and only those people who are willing to spend what is most valuable to them, which is their time, to help others, to help the next generation of entrepreneurs. That's how this whole thing started. And the recipe has proved very potent and it's traveled well. It's 21 years old now in Silicon Valley, and it's now in 60 chapters in 17 countries. So it's done extremely well. The model that works here is it's not a top-down kind of a structure. Everyone is a volunteer, and some volunteer gets the idea that some programs needs to be that the TIE needs this kind of programs for fulfilling this kind of a need. That's how we have new programs like TIE Angels that fund startups. We have an accelerator here called TIE Launchpad. We started this year TIE CIO Forum, and one of the CIOs in that CIO forum, she had this idea that we needed a program like this. So I want to introduce the main drivers behind this program, who conceived this program and has put together this program. She is in the IBM CIO office, and I think no longer, right? Or you moved on? You're still there? Just moved. Okay. She's moved on to do something bigger and better, and she's being helped by our excellent program manager here, Kelsey. Can you please raise your hand? There she is, and so Monica and Kelsey have put together this program. So let me just please give a big of hand to Monica.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much for coming and joining us. We welcome you to this. This is our second event in this series. The first one was about 2 months ago, and we had a very good standing room crowd there as well. So we appreciate your support, and I think you're going to find this to be a very valuable and effective session for you. The way we're going to work it is we're going to have a panel, and it's going to be very interactive, and we're going to be asking questions. You can feel free to interject. I have some canned questions up here, so I don't forget some key ones. But you're welcome to interject and ask questions as well, because that'll keep it to be more fun. And after we finish the panel, we have a raffle drawing. So that's another feature that we found to be very exciting last time. We will be giving away an hour with each of our panelists, and basically once you win that, if you're lucky enough. Last time, by the way, the winners were all sitting in the middle of the room right there. So you may want to find some seats in the middle. But once, after the drawing, you can set up some time. We'll give you the contact information for one of the CIOs that you might win some time with. And that way you can go and ask them what you have in mind or any kind of questions. And then after that, we'll have mentoring. So at each of these tables where you see the placards, we will have mentors, and you're free to move around between tables and informally ask your questions. So before we invite the panelists up here, any questions, anything anyone wanted to bring up? Would the panelists and the mentors please just stand for a minute? Maybe we should have a round of applause for them for volunteering. All right, and with that, I'll invite the panelists to come up and join me. So thank you very much for joining us. And I know you've taken time away from your busy days and really jumped in to help, and we haven't really prepared you very much, but I do have a list of questions, so hopefully there are no surprises here. I know everybody's very eager to understand what a CIO thinks and how to reach out to you, so thank you. And before we begin, if you could introduce yourselves, I would appreciate that. So maybe Shamlo,
Sure.
starting with you.
Okay, I'm full name Shammu Chatterjee. I go by Sham. I'm the CIO at Caladas Cloud. I run corporate IT as well as SaaS operations for our products, customer-facing products. I've been in the Valley since '94. I've worked on the East Coast, West Coast, and so on. Entire career is in IT, and love to hear from you on the questions that actually Monica put together. It's pretty good. I think it answered a lot of different things that you probably have. So I'm waiting to be surprised.
Hi there, Chris Beatty. I'm with GDSU, CIO there. I've been there about 2.5 years. Prior to that, I spent 10 years at VeriSign, internet security company, and part of that, I was in consulting, selling to CIOs. So I can appreciate the dilemma and what a pain we are. So looking forward to an interactive panel and hopefully a lively discussion.
Hi, my name is Jessica Denacor, and I'm the CIO at Varian Medical Systems. We make medical devices and software to treat cancer. We're about a $3 billion company. And I run the IT organization globally. And prior to this, I've been 8 years with Varian, and prior I was with Hewlett Packard and Agilent Technologies in a lot of different functions, but all IT, and different locations around the world. So I've bought a lot of services and products, so I guess that qualifies me for the panel.
And the surprise question.
You spend money.
All right, so I'm going to start with a question that I think a lot of people in the audience would have on their minds. And the question is, when you have a new startup, whether it's your first one, second one, how do you find the CIOs? How do you reach out to them? Because a lot of times, it's very difficult. You can try LinkedIn, you can try, but a lot of times it goes into the secretary or assistant's inbox. So what has your experience been? What's the right way to approach you, or how do you find the startups?
I guess I'm going first. To be very honest with you, and I'm sure this is common across my colleagues here too, we get probably upwards of 3 dozen phone calls and dozens more of emails every single day. And so most of the time it goes click delete, right, I'm being honest. So how do you get a hold of me or someone like me in my position? It would probably be most likely through networking. And if you have a compelling product, if you really feel that your product can solve a certain problem or problems, I would somehow recommend, I don't know how you're going to be doing this, but recommend getting a hold of me. I'm going to speak about myself now. Purely through networking, else it's going to be really hard. And if you feel that it's almost impossible to get a hold of someone like me, I don't know what else to tell you besides saying try and, don't give up hope, keep sending those emails or voicemails and reach out that way. But networking is something I recommend, and also keep your messages short and have a very compelling website, because a lot of times I do go to websites, if something just piques my attention, I go there. And if I find the website, really clumsily ordered or something, I lose interest right away. And I feel if you can put together a proper website to showcase your product, I'm not sure how your product's going to be. That's the way I look at things.
So echo the same, but maybe a little bit of context into at least my view of what's going on in the enterprise right now. I actually think there's been no better time than in recent past to be an enterprise startup focused on selling into IT, because of all the disruption with cloud and mobile and security. I'll speak for myself because I don't want to generalize, but I'm actually hungry at this point to hear from startups because there's so much disruption happening, which can drive bottom line cost improvement, productivity improvement, etc. The trick is, how do you get there, right? And a lot of times with large global companies, again, I'll speak for myself, what we're often battling is our own teams and their inertia. So if you take the networking team that's always bought Cisco gear and always deployed Cisco gear, talking to them about SDN is sometimes threatening. So I'll echo what was just said in terms of persistence, right? Just because the first 5 emails don't land, be persistent, because I do delete a lot of them, but I do read them, right? And if the content is relevant to a problem that I'm trying to solve, you're going to get a reply. Because as I said, I think there's a tremendous amount of innovation happening out there in the enterprise space. There's a lot of money being poured in by the VCs. I'm actually hungry to meet with startups to understand what's going on. The problem has to resonate. And one of the best examples I have is from Blue Jeans Network about 2 years ago. I forget the sales rep's name. If I ever meet him in person, I will give him the absolute award for persistence. The guy just would not give up. It was amazing. I would have a quote in a magazine. He'd say, hey, I read your quote. Here's how Blue Jeans can apply. You know, JDSU would do its earnings. Hey, I read your earnings. Here's how Blue Jeans could help with your margin. And so it was fantastic. So I'd say be persistent. Networking is key. I think there's never been a better time or easier time. I know it's going to probably sound bad because it's hard, but with LinkedIn, finding somebody who I trust who can give you an intro is the best path in. Right, and with LinkedIn, it's never been easier, I think, compared to 10 years ago. So I would leverage LinkedIn heavily. Persistence, I think, is the key. And try to find a way to get some at-bats. What I mean by that is a problem that's going to resonate. So maybe you do your research at a lower level, and then hit me with an email, or wait. And I say it's not a problem right now. But I think not a direct answer, because if it was a direct answer, you guys would have access to CIOs all tomorrow. But those are just my thoughts on the topic.
The only thing I would add is one of the ways that I've gotten introduced to new technologies has actually been at CIO forums where they invite people that are bringing new technologies, and you kind of, I think actually you have to pay for a space there. So there is a cost to it typically, but for instance, in Palo Alto on Thursday, there's an event that all the CIOs in the Bay Area go to. And they typically will have sponsors that will have little booths outside. And I found probably 3 different startups through that process. And again, it's to solve a problem that I have. So a lot of times it's maybe a niche problem around security. The one that I found there that I love is Okta. A number of years ago, which is single sign-on. You know, my team was telling me it was going to cost me multi-millions of dollars to solve that problem. And I said, I don't have that much to solve that problem. And they came in to solve that problem in a very easy way in the cloud. And so again, that was one where that forum provided me an opportunity to see some new technologies. And there's a couple in the San Francisco as well that do that. There's quite a few. Avanta, getting on those agendas. And if you're already paired with a CIO can recommend you to go and present at those. So it's a good opportunity, I think, other than the things that you just talked about. I don't like the phone calls, and I don't like the phone calls by people other than the person trying to really do the sale. It might be their admin calling. If they don't have time to call me directly, don't call me. You know, don't have someone else call on your behalf. And then I think the other piece is the networking. And I mean, I found, you know, just at events I've gone to, or even in vacation where I might be talking to other people, and you find out there's a connection. I was on the Palace on Wheels. Does anybody know what Palace on Wheels in India? I tell you, I made more connections on that train. And coming back to the
Book your
U.S.
tickets.
Because you really get to know people. And they met some people that had children that were in startups that, you know, wanted a connection. And I was more than willing. Again, it was about the networking. And not necessarily because I was just a CIO, but, you know, you get to know somebody and you want to help them out. And it's a great way to do it. So anyway, that was my 2 cents on that topic.
Maybe just one thing to confirm. So I never listen to my voicemail. Do you?
No.
Okay, so phone is dead. Emails, you have a shot.
Good point. So are any of you going to the Palace on Wheels so that we can book accordingly? So interestingly, I think it is very difficult to get people's attention, email, cell phones. I know the delete thing, and I try to mark everything as spam as quickly as I can, because after a while, every solution sounds the same, and everybody has a mobile solution and something or the other. But let's say they get your attention. Now what? So what is the typical progression? Is there a proof of concept involved, or how do you do this?
We typically do a proof of concept. And so we want to try out what the company is offering. And so almost in all cases, that's what we do. And we look, before we actually engage, we do require some legal documents. So when you are going to the enterprise, most of them will require something from a legal, either NDAs or our standard paper. Sign it. I mean, that's the easiest thing. If you can't afford lawyers, don't get lawyers. Use the papers that are on there. Just make sure you're protected on the IP. But other than that, that's typically the way we've gotten engaged.
I would agree. Proof of concepts, and I don't buy anything without trying before buying. I would say, though, when I'm evaluating a proof of concept, what's going through my head is, how do I get this proof of concept done with the least amount of investment possible with my people's time, with the most possible proof points, which puts the burden on all of you to supply the resource. And you guys are startups, we get that, but we're not sympathetic to it that much, saying deal with it. Because our teams have 1,000 other priorities I'm giving them. So again, if you think of the mindset of least amount of burden on me, which proves the most value on your side, I think that's key. And then the other thing I would say is, don't be super eager after the proof of concept to say, okay, can we sign, right? Because a lot of times we need to think about it, what's the context? When's the right problem to solve this? Or when's the right time to solve this problem? Because you guys might have knocked it out on the POC, but in our roadmaps, right, we all have roadmaps going, say, okay, we're gonna get to that in 6 months. So that's where the persistence comes in. Keep checking back in on that proof of concept. And I have multiple examples where we've done a proof of concept and we noted it as interesting but not relevant technology. But guess what? Business models change, priorities change. It was very relevant 9 months later. And the good news is, I called a guy and I said, hey, remember that thing we did? Let's go. So just stay with it.
On mic now. Okay. Now, for the proof of concept, I think that's key. And I think actually just last week, met with the folks at Acacia. They had a very compelling product. Yeah, there you go. The proof of concept is absolutely a must. And I'd say, like he just mentioned, you have to be patient. And it has to be as non-intrusive to my team as possible. And especially if it's some sort of technology solution where people feel kind of threatened, you got to just be more patient with that, because there's a lot of things that we got to manage in-house as well. The other thing is budget. We might like something that you're trying to solve, but we may not have planned for it. So that could be another reason why things could take a little longer. I'm part of a mid-sized company. My budget is closely watched. And especially when things come up out of the blue.
Doesn't get easier at a big company.
Yeah, so even if we do like something, be prepared for that. Oh, can't do it this quarter, has to be next, or whenever down the line. But believe me, if there's a compelling solution that you have, put the salesy stuff away, especially when you're talking to the CIOs and managers underneath me, because we really want to know as quickly as possible what can you do to solve the problem we have at hand, the problems we have at hand. The proof of concept is a must. Come with a ballpark budgeting number as well. A lot of times when we talk to startups or even more mature companies, they're like, oh no, we'll do a proof of concept, 2 months, 3 months, whatever. It's for free. But then the only thing that goes at the back of my mind and the mind of my managers is how much is the solution going to cost? And if you guys come back with some pricing that's outrageous, it's going to be a waste of time on all our parts. So I would recommend having some sort of pricing schedule that you have in the back of your mind, and and give us a big discount to start with.
Okay, talking about waste of time. So a little bit of a twisted question here. How does a startup know whether a proof of concept is going to be worthwhile? Because going into a big company, it can suck up all your resource and all your time, and it's a very expensive proposition. So how does someone know whether it's a worthwhile exercise, whether you really are interested in their solution? And how do some good examples of what succeeded, what may be best practices or ideas for what a small company can do to make this worthwhile for themselves as well?
Yeah.
I know for me, I know we talked about having the least amount of our resources, but if we're not willing to put up a resource, then don't do it. Because it means that we're not that interested. I mean, I'm a person that likes to be honest and upfront. I'll tell somebody, hey, we can't do this right now because of X. But if I put the resources up and I put even just one or two, that's quite a bit to be able to sacrifice from the rest of the plan that you have to get done. So I would say definitely make sure that there's some resourcing, minimum, but some resourcing from whoever you're going to partner with. And then I think you're not going to have that answer to the question. I totally agree with that point. Because there's times when we learn about a technology, we think about it, but we're not ready to solve, like big data. It's not a big issue for me right now in our company. And so I listen to what people have to say, but I won't commit to a proof of concept because I don't want to waste your time and I don't want to waste mine. But I get the idea about later on, maybe I'll come back and say, yep, it makes sense now. But I think that the key there is we have to put something in there as a CIO. Otherwise, I wouldn't trust that you're going to, get a good partner there.
I agree with that. I think the bottom line is you're never going to know 100%, right? So it's a risk management question on your guys' part. Look for the sign or our resources assigned. The other thing, it's classic sales, right? If it drags on too long, it means it's not that relevant, not that important, right? So to me, it's the usual tactics of sales to know whether you're wasting your time or not. And then I would say if you don't have the management team's attention, if you're down at the staff level, I'd say you might want to reconsider investing a lot of time there because they might be solving a problem that's just way not even on the radar.
From my perspective, like I said before, if you come to me with the solution for some of the problems that I currently have or will have or something that's on our pipeline, you will get the attention. It may not happen right away because of various projects or resource constraints. However, it is very important that you do get the attention. I'm just going to echo what was just mentioned. And if you feel that you're not getting it, maybe just put it off. Because resources, at least in a company my size, are always constrained. You're working on several different things. Be patient, and don't be too pushy. That's another thing that can really turn us off. We understand where you're coming from. We really do. We honestly do. On the other hand, you got to also try and empathize where we are coming from as well. Everyone's got their hands full, right? But I would definitely do even before starting the POC, make sure that you have a solution that you're trying to solve, a solution that you're trying to solve for one or more problems that we currently have. I think this thing with the Kasha, for example, is going to really benefit my operations and my company. So I would give a lot of importance to it, and I'd put it higher on the priority list. So if you can, hone in on that very early on in the game, I think you'll be well ahead.
Does anyone have a question before I hog this and do my next surprise?
I have a comment.
Would you like?
Sure. To everything that you guys have said, I would just add one thing, which is POCs, I think, are usually successful when you define what are the desired outcomes and goals. Right? Because if you don't have that well defined, you can take 2 months and have everyone walks away going, wow, that was awesome. But did you actually prove what it was that you were trying to prove, right? So yes, allocating resources is a good indicator. all these things are good indicators, but also being able to define the outcomes to say, hey, if we could do the following things, we will then define the POC as a success or not a success. And then at least if you fail, then you know why you failed. So I think those things are important too.
Okay, so question. Do you folks do long-range planning? What is the time horizon? And what % of your time do you allocate to such initiatives?
We typically, I'll speak, sorry. I'll speak for myself. We typically do things, we plan for the forthcoming year at the end of the current calendar year. And we constantly on the watch for what else that comes up in the business, because things are pretty fluid, at least in our line of work and my company. And so at any given time, we're always looking for solving issues that come up our plate, but however, most of the planning is done toward the end of the year. And I don't know how it is in larger companies.
Probably looking tactically at the next 12 months or so on a rolling basis. But I'd say probably 25 to 30% of my time, long range being defined as 2 to 3 years out. What do we need to be thinking about now to make sure we're not behind a couple of years from now?
It used to be you could think maybe 5 years out. When I first started in IT, you could think that far and it might actually happen. But now it's really 18 months to 36 months where you can do your kind of long-term planning because the technology changes and the business changes that fast. But we do tactical, for a year. And so we have a roadmap for that given year, and every quarter we can change it. But I'd say right now, it's March, and I'm planning for our year end, which is November. So right now is the time I'm doing the planning, the funding, all of that for next fiscal year. So it is quite a bit ahead of time. But we can always bring in POCs any time of the year. That said, if they're not a lot of money, we have a pretty big budget, and we can, bring those in if we're trying to solve a problem. So I never say you have to stick to the plan, but if it's big dollars, yeah, you have to stick to the plan. But if it's smaller dollars, and I'm talking smaller, like 100,000 and less, multi-millions, you gotta plan for in advance.
I hear you say that you want to try everything before you buy, and I completely get that. And earlier we used to have traditional POCs or pilots that would go for weeks and months. Do you see that shifting towards SaaS, where startup puts out a really compelling demo where you can upload your data, they can demonstrate the value with your data and your business case and solve a problem? And would you still insist on on-site POC with a real trial? Or
Yeah, a POC might not be on-site. If it's a cloud solution, it would be in the cloud. And it may not be with your data, it may be with someone else's data. So we have both, depending on what the product is. And the timelines, again, is dependent on what you're trying to solve. Sometimes it's a bigger problem, and it's not going to be done in 2 weeks. But there's other solutions that we can do something within 2 to 3 weeks. And we've done that as well.
Sure.
I think the beauty of today's cloud models is we can jointly get POCs done, sometimes in a matter of a week, right? You identify a problem, you get the resources engaged, 3 days later you have a result, and it's fantastic. So because we're saying POCs, I wouldn't want people to take away that's a 3-month resource allocation. It can be as quick as you guys can run.
And I'd also like to add one more thing is, especially with a company my size and budget being what it is, we will really want to prove that what you're telling us up front is not all marketing fluff. So we really want to see that you can actually solve the problem. So my team is very, very tightly integrated with that line of thought. So POC is definitely important for us.
So I think one of you mentioned that, it depends on the things having to fit within the CIO priorities. So I'm curious in terms of each one of you, what are your 3 priorities for 2014?
So I'll go off the top of my head. Distill it down into 3. You sound like my CEO. So if I look at areas of focus and where we're maybe trying to disrupt, mobile is an obvious one. How do we mobile enable every service that we have? And that has so many different dimensions, from security, encryption, end user devices, and to, how do we VDI, VAI, all that kind of stuff. So mobile is a huge topic. Sales effectiveness is a huge topic for us. Why wouldn't it be, right? Driving top line revenue, but in particular for us, our sales forces are going through a shift. So we're really hoping to leverage concepts around big data to improve our sales effectiveness. And the third would be in the area of really extended supply chain velocity. So not unlike most high-tech manufacturers, we have an outsourced CM model. We then have suppliers supplying them. Getting visibility and more velocity through that whole supply chain can be a real big needle mover for supply chain. Enabling technologies there are big data, collaboration, etc.
Okay, I want to ask a question. Do you have a comment?
No.
My turn this time. Coming from a big company myself, everything we develop in a large company is based on performance and scalability and the architecture, and we have these endless reviews. So it's not just about, get some developers and develop it and speed to market. It's really about scale it for the enterprise. What are some of the things that you would point out people should look at, as we develop products in a startup? What are some of the things that you would warn people about, or say, these are the things that have gone and bitten other teams as they've done POCs, or what do you watch out for?
Probably the one thing I ask is, I want to know what your support plan is. I want to know how you're going to support either that product or service after we implement, because usually that's the pain point, is people think about developing, putting the technology in, everything else, but they don't think about how are you going to actually support it, and do I have a support team to actually provide those support services? So always thinking about and being able to articulate how you're going to grow, because that's typically the last thing people put their money into, is having the support there. But from an enterprise perspective, I can't buy stuff that can't get supported and have a support model, moving forward. So that's typically, what I ask is, what's your strategy if it's software? Well, how do you version it? How do you control it? How do you make sure it's secure? Because I've got to run the operation. The operation runs around the world, and I have 8,000 employees that have to typically use whatever I put in there, and I need it to work day in, day out. So that's probably the number one issue I have with startups, has been when we've brought in that product that's new, is having that support model and having it run effectively.
Right, and I'd like to add just one more to that, is your financial viability. How stable you're going to be, because that's something that we get asked a lot in my company. So when you come and when you have sign off on the POC and everything, and you're starting to talk to finance, for example, make sure that you got your ducks all lined up in a row and you answer all the questions, because that's the way we work.
Yeah, and I have an example of where we went with a small startup to do a sales application. I still have that in my environment. I hope to get rid of it this year, but it's still 3 guys in a closet that are supporting it, and my sales force runs on it worldwide. And I just cringe every time I think about that.
Monica, you mentioned one thing around scalability. At least for me, that's something I find myself thinking about far less, simply because most of you are running your stuff on Amazon or Google or some other public cloud offering where scalability has sort of disappeared from the concern list. It is more about support, viability, and are you going to be there for the long haul?
And security.
Security, of course.
So talking to a large enterprise, always like there's multiple stakeholders involved, right? There are different functional areas that involve in the decision-making process. So CIOs play a big role in that. So how are each of you are sort of internally structured, where finance or procurement or engineering or whatever are looking for the various enterprise solutions? So, and how do you sort of coordinate that process? Because it's not, many times it's not a one person that's making the decision. So you have any perspective on that? How do you have any internal systems and processes set up to make the decision making?
Sure. I can talk to what we do, which maybe not seem like a well-oiled machine, but I think there's two different paths. One is technology we're buying for ourselves. Let's say it's to solve a MDM problem or a BYOD problem. Then it's IT and IT making the decision. There's a lot less stakeholders involved. If we're buying something, let's say on behalf of the sales organization, typically the path we go down is we in IT vet it, make sure it makes sense, does it check all the boxes for us, then and only then go take it to our business counterparts and say, we found something that we think solves your problem or can help boost productivity, drive revenue, have them get involved at that point. And depending on where you're at in terms of those internal relationships, that can be very quick or very long. But I would say if it's a solution geared towards a functional department other than IT, you're always going to have that. We don't have a big formal process around it. It's just more of, hey, we have this thing, it solves a problem, take a look at it, and if it meets the need, let's go.
For our internal IT stuff, basically that is my organization that makes the decision. And even on the business side today, you don't go around the IT organization. I mean, that's like a big no-no in my company because most of our things are integrated. And so no longer is it a good idea to go to a function to get a solution bought, because most of the time it's got to integrate somehow with something else or run on the platform. So it's always good to make sure that there is somebody from IT in that decision. So that would always be my recommendation, is make sure there is somebody, whether it's a VP or a CIO or whatever, in that decision making. Don't try and sell just to a specific business or function, because most of the time it'll come back and haunt you afterwards, and it'll haunt the business too. So we typically have it all funnel through IT, but the decision makers are including those functions in businesses. And then I actually own IT procurement, so all the procurement for the company and indirect procurement, a lot of times that is your CIO now doing a lot of that procurement versus a separate organization. So at least for our company, we have procurement within the IT function.
Add one thing, sorry, before you shut. There is, in my view, let me be a little bit more direct, there is no quicker way to piss off a CIO than try to sell around us. There is no quicker path to just killing it.
Right. I think these two have it common. Captured really well.
I'm polite.
We have a question over here.
My question was, do you post on some place website, what are your common problems you're trying to solve? Just like Jessica was saying, you got $1 million internal quote for single login.
Yes.
So rather than you going and finding those companies or accidentally running into them in Wheels of or Palace of Wheels, if you were to put those, that will solve the problem of having 3,000 emails a week or at least. So people are not wasting time trying to reach you and tell you there may be a problem.
I can speak for myself. So what I do is, I reach out to my network, to other fellow CIOs or other IT directors and VPs, including my own team. That's number one. Number two is we Google a lot. We do a lot of searches. I personally don't post outside to see, hey, is anyone out there, who can help me out with this particular problem I have? I don't think any of my guys do. Nobody in my team does that either.
Yeah, we typically will go to other CIOs. So we're part, I have like 3 different CIO groups that I'm part of, and I do one extensively with benchmarking, and we share what our roadmap is for the next year and a half, 2 years, and then we see, who did you use? We always ask that, who did you use? What are the new people out there? And so it really is the CIO network that I know I use to find out who the new players are and that type of thing. And we don't post. We'll talk to people. If people come on board and they look like they're going to solve a problem, we'll share all our problems with them. If we feel comfortable with that group, but we don't usually post.
Why do you don't feel comfortable with posting your needs?
Yeah. Well, sometimes there are needs that we can't share because of confidentiality for the business. We do in our annual report. So if you actually take the time to look at an annual online report, it will typically post our 5 top initiatives for the company, and you better believe that those 5 I'm working on. So, for instance, for our company, if you looked at our annual report, it talks about globalization and very specific in the countries. So if you know that I probably need some solutions that are Brazil specific, or Algeria, or that type of thing. Or we're putting an emphasis on sales, service, and marketing productivity. You won't see big data out there on ours. So there are goals those goals top of the company are what I'm working on. So, but again, it's not detail. And we don't put that out there. Well, I've never been asked to put it out there either. So now I'm going to have to think about it to see if there's a better way.
That's kind of obvious question because public sector does this, so we can see what they try to prefer. But it's difficult to understand what large companies do.
Yeah.
So we do this farm thing and harass you guys.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Maybe the model evolves. I think it's a good question, but I think generally the hesitancy is around exposing. And if you're saying you're looking for a solution, it means you have a problem. So one, you're never going to do that in anything related to security, right? 2, there's intense competitive pressure out there, right? So the minute you say, I just said we're looking to improve sales productivity. What does that mean? We have room for improvement there. I wouldn't want our competitors saying, hey, the CIO of JDSU went out and publicly said their sales team sucks. Right? My CEO would be extremely happy with me. So I don't think it's anything I foresee. Maybe the next generation that feels the need to post a picture every time they eat a hot dog, that kind of stuff.
If each of you chose 2 things, one of 2 things, revenue increase or gross margin increase or net margin increase, which one would it be?
Revenue. Our stock price is absolutely correlated to revenue out of those 3 metrics.
Right. Thank you.
But we have to care about all of them.
Care versus pay, right?
Yeah.
Take one of the 2, not both.
We have stuff in all 3
Good.
areas.
Good.
Hi, sorry, Dilip Rao, I'm here from Australia, so I just want to share a story with about open innovation. Coca-Cola just ran a 3-day exercise in Sydney, and they exposed their supply chain to about 20 startups and said, this is our supply chain, this is what it looks like. They took them to visit their factories, ride with their truck drivers, and said, here are some issues we have in each of these 5 parts of the supply chain, can you solve it? And they gave a prize, grand prize of $3,000. But all of them had a go, and the little team from NICTA, which is a big R&D lab, actually won the prize. It was also about exposing to startups enterprise problems and the issues with that, which are complex in large enterprises. It's not another app that's going to solve it. So I think there's opportunity for large enterprises to expose some of your problems to startups and get some disruptive innovation going.
I agree with you. Just to comment, traditionally we've done this thing called Supplier Day, and I'm going to take an action item from this meeting. Typically at our Supplier Day, we invite the usual suspects, IBM, AT&T, Oracle, the big guys, right? But maybe it's time to redo Supplier Day, turn it on its head, and invite all of the startups that can drive more innovation within our enterprise. So
Happy to work with you on that.
Point taken.
Yes. So related question, how much does the old saying of a CIO not getting fired for picking IBM still apply?
It's true.
Only for IBM. When a startup goes up against a couple of the big guys in a bidding for an initiative project, what chances do they have?
I think your chances are pretty good, especially if you come in with a very compelling solution with a very attractive price, and you can show that your financial viability, you're here to stay. You have my attention, and I'll do everything to fight for you, for sure.
That's the problem, right? I mean, the financial viability will come, investors will.
Hey guys, can you please wait for the mic to get to you? It's very disrupting to the people that are holding the mic. Thank you.
Just a comment. I think chances are good, as I mentioned earlier, in recent past, I think this is the best time I've ever seen it to be in a startup focused on enterprise IT. I'd say it's very dependent on the problem, right, that I'm trying to solve. Am I going to take a risk with my core accounting system? Probably a lot less so than I will with maybe some new direct marketing thing we want to try.
Yeah, and I would also say, and echo that, I sometimes look for smaller companies and smaller service providers than the big ones out there. And the reason is, I'm not that big. Believe it or not, at $3 billion, we're not that big. And so a lot of these providers, and whether it's IBM or others, they're not competitive and in pricing or even in the type of services. So we typically will go with smaller because we're smaller. We want to be a big fish to somebody. And so I would say it actually has changed dramatically, that we are more than willing, particularly as smaller companies, to go with somebody that will focus in on us. We want to be the big fish for you.
Sorry, you lost your mic.
All right.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Just a follow-on question on that. When we are as a startup competing with the big ones, of course, we have, we don't have the resources, and we are competing directly with them. In your psychological mind, specifically with respect to the pricing, do you say if IBM is selling you something for 100,000, you will squeeze a startup for 50,000, or ask them to give it for 25,000? I mean, is that something goes on in your decision making?
If you're a Series A with no customers, it might be 5,000. Just being honest, right?
Right.
Yeah, we usually do expect something in return, whether it's cost or maybe more service, for that opportunity.
Now I will say, even if your example, 100,000 IBM, I don't know why they're picking on IBM. And if I do say you don't have a customer, $5,000, I like to believe I'm a good partner and say, okay, I'm going to kill you on price, but I'll introduce you to 5 of my CIO friends. If you want to have them call me, I'll tell them good things, and that sort of thing, which is, I view as part of the negotiation as well. So I wouldn't discount that. If you give away a little bit on price, but you get their willingness to stand up for you and recommend you to other people, that's worth more than that other 45 grand.
Yeah, and I'll give an example, the one I did about Okta, because we went with them probably 3.5 years ago when they were first starting out, and they gave us a great deal, but at the same time, I've also spoken to their investors so they get more money. I've spoken to Gartner on their behalf because they really delivered to a solution I really needed to solve a problem. And so there's a lot of value in that, and I've probably been one of their best sales reps as a result of it. Now, we're going to be coming up on the renegotiation of the contract, so I'm hoping they remember that.
Right. I just want to add and echo what they said. I mean, NetSuite's a public company. Heck, I'm still there, they use me as a reference to this day. And they see value in that, so I just wouldn't go, for the numbers, at least not when you're trying to start out. Get your name out there is what I would recommend.
One question that I had made a special note of, because I think a lot of people are interested in knowing, what about the legal aspects? Is there something that we need to keep in mind, before approaching a big company, or how do you approach that?
We do. I know for our company, we always require an NDA. So non-disclosure, I know what A stands for. Agreement. I know, non-disclosure. So we do require it, and we typically like to do things on our paper in terms of a contract when it's a new company, because that's been vetted. I don't want to waste time. I don't want you to waste time. But again, we do require it. We don't do anything without at least the NDA.
Just sign our paper.
Right. right? Nothing else to add there. That, and I know my legal department, they're very big on compliance and security. So it'll be good if when you come to talk to us and we get to that stage, you have all the bases covered. It's very important, in addition to the financial stuff as well.
And if you don't have that, we can also give our documents that have it. So that's why we say, and we jokingly say, use our paper. Our paper has it in there. So all the things about security and data privacy, you just have to say that you do comply to it.
We have one final question.
So I just wanted to ask there, in terms of posting, your reluctance to actually put something online and identify you have a problem within the company, are you willing, or is the market ready for actually some sort of online anonymous forums which you can actually post questions, we need solutions for X, Y, and Z, and then for startups or other companies to go in and actually offer solutions? And that kind of gets away from the NDAs, and also it gets away from the fact that you're exposing issues, and then you can actually filter in possible solutions that you want to pursue further.
I think you would call that ghost blogging.
Yeah, I mean, I can't give you an answer on readiness off the top of my head. I would argue that those forums exist today. Gartner has one. It's not anonymous, but it's 2 seconds to create an anonymous account. LinkedIn has CIO groups, so I'd have to be smarter than I am to answer the question on readiness. I'm not, personally.
Okay, any insights based on actually purchasing something and trying to implement it? Because I have some horror stories, and I just wonder if you have any best practices to quickly share here.
For us, it's very time-oriented and process-specific. So when you come to do a POC and we get to that stage, be prepared to be more than willing to have at least some sort of basic, I don't expect you to be project managers or anything, but have some sort of plan in place with the exact outcome, and stay close to the timelines that you commit to, unless of course you're waiting on me or my team. But that's very, very important for us, because we would want to make sure that things just don't go sideways, and it goes both ways, right? We want to make sure we don't waste each other's time either. So that's really huge for us. You want to add anything to that?
No, the only other thing I'd say is the most successful startup interactions that I've had has been when it actually clicks, because you're actually solving a problem that we might have. And then personalities. Personalities do matter. I know people don't like to hear that, but we typically don't like people coming in saying, having big heads and egos and everything else. For me, it's just people trying to work together to solve a problem, and the personalities work together, and it's a team effort. That's been the ones that have been most successful, where both sides have just put it out there and worked together and made it happen. It was all about the people, somewhat about the product too, because it solves the problem, but the people still matter.
The only other thing to add, not to be duplicative, is if you're concerned at all about your solution scaling, advise your client on starting with a bite-sized chunk and then scale it, right? So that kind of honesty and transparency is useful. So even after you exit the POC, if you feel more comfortable as a startup stalling with X%, 5-10% of, call it the user population, then sort of mandate that to your client, because it's probably better off for your client.
Great. Anything else before we end and do the drawing? All right. I'm not going to open up to questions. I think
okay.
That'll open another floodgate here. All right. We have an IBM card. I should pick that one. All right, so this is for Shamlo. I'm going to pick for you.
Oh, God. It's a company called Together. There's no name on it.
Together.
Oh, no, there it is. I got bad eyesight. I might just look young, but actually I can't read. Arthur Hill? Oh, okay.
And now for Chris. So
I don't get to pick my own.
Here you go. Good luck, guys. He's picking his own.
No one to blame. I close my eyes. I recognize it. My card. I thought you wanted my card. Purple Patch, Alida. Hopefully I pronounced that okay.
That's me.
Oh, wow. Merrill Lynch, Wealth Management. Avanti? Okay.
All right, so with that, I'd like to thank the CIOs who joined us today. Thank you very much. I think that was a very, very fun session. Now we're going to have our mentoring, networking, so feel free to approach whoever you have questions for. And it's free form, so we have about an hour for that. And thank you very much again for coming and joining us. Really appreciate it.